Good morning. It's May 16th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the 2022 report on international religious freedom. The annual report says North Korea continues to execute and physically torture people for their religious activities. It says the regime's denial of religious freedom remains absolute. During a cabinet meeting in the coming hour, President Yoon is expected to veto the controversial Nursing Act, which seeks to give professional nurses more independence in their duties. And Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelenskyy made a surprise visit to UK again, where the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak promised more attack drones and missiles to Ukraine. The U.S. Department of State on Tuesday released its annual report on the status of religious freedom in every country. Now, the report raised concerns about the denial of the right to freedom of thought and religion in North Korea. Our Lee Si-hoo starts us off.
The right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion continues to be denied in North Korea, with no alternative belief systems tolerated by the authorities, read the U.S. Department of State's annual report to Congress on international religious freedom. The 2022 report on international religious freedom, which describes the status of religious freedom in every country, released Monday, showed special concern for the violation of the right to freedom of thought in North Korea. It highlighted that the situation had not fundamentally changed since the publication of the 2014 UN Commission of Inquiry report on human rights in the DPRK, which found that authorities almost completely denied the rights to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. It also said that the authorities in many instances committed human rights violations that constituted crimes against humanity. The regime reportedly continued to execute, torture, arrest, and physically abuse individuals for religious activities. It also notes that COVID-19 restrictions on travel to and from the country further reduced information about conditions, making details on cases of abuse and estimates involving religious groups difficult to verify. However, data was provided by the NGOs Korea Future, Open Doors USA, and the Database Center for North Korean Human Rights to show the severity of persecution of religious groups. As for China, the report cited religious groups, NGOs, and international media reports that pointed out that the government is continuing to assert control over religious groups and restrict activities it perceives as threatening to the state or CCP interests. The U.S. Department of State submits the reports in accordance with the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998. North Korea and China are on the Department of State's list of countries of particular concern. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
President Yoon today is expected to veto the controversial Nursing Act that seeks to give professional nurses more independence in their duties. The act, spearheaded by the opposition bloc, is set to be submitted to a cabinet meeting later this morning, where President Yoon is largely expected to exercise his veto power. This comes after the ruling People Power Party and the government over the weekend decided to request that President Yoon veto the act, citing potential chaos stemming from the conflict of interest between doctors, nurses, and nursing assistants. It will be the second time for Yoon to send the bill back to Parliament, with the first being a bill on the government purchasing access rights. Starting today, electricity and gas rates here in the country are up by more than 5%. The hike comes to help state-run utility companies narrow their losses. Our Han Sung reports.
Starting Tuesday, South Korea's electricity rates will go up by 8 won, or about 1 cent, per kilowatt hour. It's estimated to cost a 4-member household around 3,000 won, or $2.20 more on average per month. Gas bills for cooking and heating will rise as well, by 1.04 won per megajoule. That will cost a 4-member household about 4,400 won, or $3.30 more each month. Both rates are increasing by 5.3% from current levels. The Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy, which had discussions with the ruling People Power Party earlier on Monday morning, said that the hike was inevitable.
An extra hike is unavoidable if we are to procure a sustainable supply of energy and normalize management at the Korea Electric Power Corporation and the Korea Gas Corporation.
The hikes for the April to June period come amid high global energy costs and mounting losses for the state utility companies. In the first quarter of 2023, the government had increased the electricity rates by 13.11 per kilowatt hour, but had frozen gas prices to keep heating bills down during the winter. Meanwhile, to ease the burden of higher bills on energy-vulnerable households, the government and the People Power Party have agreed to implement a set of support measures. Those include exemptions from the rate hikes for a year for socially vulnerable households falling within the low-income bracket, as well as an expansion of energy vouchers and an expansion of the so-called energy cashback policy that gives rate discounts to households that save electricity. 한성우, Arirang News.
On Monday morning, a magnitude 4.5 earthquake struck the east coast of South Korea, the largest quake reported this year. Now, experts are concerned over a possible larger earthquake in the future, as the region has been reporting several smaller magnitude quakes. Our Lee Seung-ja has more.
The magnitude 4.5 earthquake reported in the East Sea on Monday morning was the largest quake reported in South Korea this year. It's also the largest of the 16 total seismic activities reported in the region in 2023. Monday's earthquake was felt in most parts of Gangneung province and even in some parts of Gyeongsangbuk-do, Gyeonggi-do, and Chungcheongbuk-do provinces. And due to the frequent seismic activity reported in the area, the earthquake warning level rose from attention to caution. As of April, 13 earthquakes of magnitude 2 or higher have occurred in the area within 5 kilometers of the epicenter of Monday's quake. Those include a 3.5 magnitude earthquake on April 25th and one of 3.1 magnitude this past Sunday. Also, a 4.2 magnitude earthquake in 1996 and a 4.3 magnitude earthquake occurred in 2019 in the area close to the epicenter of this recent earthquake. While experts say they can't pinpoint the exact fault zone yet, given that a series of earthquakes have occurred in the same region, the possibility of a larger earthquake cannot be ruled out. They're also trying to figure out the fault zone based on the range of earthquakes being reported in nearby areas. Experts are also concerned that more earthquakes are taking place in a shorter period of time. They added that while more analysis is needed, earthquakes with magnitude 4 or higher may be all originating from the same fault zone. With experts continuously monitoring the affected areas, and despite there being no damage reported on Monday, they say preparations for a larger earthquake are important, as the possibility of a 5.0 magnitude earthquake or higher remains. Lee Seung-ja, Arirang News.
The U.S. Consumer Price Index last month was down for the 10th straight month. Now, signs of inflation cooling down are raising expectations of a possible rate freeze. For a deeper analysis of the matter, we're joined by Professor J.W. Mason from John Jay College, City University of New York. Good morning and good evening to you, Professor.
Hello.
Hello. The U.S. Consumer Price Index rose 4.9% on year last month. That was down from the 5% reported in March. Now, it's the first time in 2 years it's under 5%. Professor Mason, how significant is this?
I think it's very significant, and even more important than that headline number is the fact that inflation is falling across almost every major category of prices. You know, over the past 2 years, we haven't had just one inflation, but several different inflations. We had goods prices, especially autos, rising very rapidly in the summer and fall of 2021 as a result of global supply chain interruptions. Then we had energy and food prices rising following the start of the war in Ukraine, and then most recently we've had a rise in service prices, especially rents and housing prices. And now we're really seeing prices stabilizing or even falling in essentially all of those categories. So at the same time, we're also seeing businesses say they expect lower inflation looking forward, and wages are coming down. So it's very hard at this point to argue that there's some core underlying inflation out there that's going to pull prices higher. It seems much more likely that if nothing major changes, we will continue to see inflation come down over the next few months.
That's right. But the problem is the inflation rate is still far above the Fed's target within the 2% range. But it's slowly, but like you said, surely being tamed. But do you expect the Fed to freeze the rate finally next month? If yes, why?
I think it's a difficult situation. You know, when inflation was close to 10%, there was almost no one who would argue that this is okay, that this is not a serious problem. But when it gets down to the 3 or 4% range, even though it's above the official target, it's not. You're not going to find the same consensus that this is critical to keep bringing it down. Remember, not too many years ago, there was a serious debate about whether the Fed should adopt a higher inflation target. And at the same time, it's clear that rapid rate increases are putting a lot of stress on the banking system. So I think that unless something big changes, it's going to be very hard for the Fed to justify a lot of additional hikes.
Right. Then that leads to our next question. What are the conditions needed for the central bank to actually end the rate hike cycle then?
Well, you know, historically, the Fed and also other central banks like the ECB have tended to overdo it. They've tended to keep raising rates too long and set off a recession. And the problem is that given the long lag between when the central bank acts and when the full effects are felt on the economy, you don't necessarily know when you reach that point until it's too late. So I think from my point of view, rather than saying when do we definitely stop, you err on the side of caution. You pause, you wait, and you see. A lot of us have gotten inflation wrong in the past, but I think there's a case now for waiting and seeing if perhaps they've already done enough.
Right. And the U.S. inflation rate has been a great interest of South Korea as well. The Bank of Korea held its key interest rate steady for the second straight month last month. Now, if the U.S. Fed does go ahead with the rate freeze next month, let's say, then how will Bank of Korea react to this? What do you think?
Well, the reality is that in many ways today, the Federal Reserve is the central bank, not just of the United States, but the entire world. It's very hard for other central banks to deviate too much from what the Fed is doing. So I think if the Fed does freeze its rate hikes or even moves towards rate cuts, that certainly creates more space for the Bank of Korea and other central banks to cut rates as well. And I think there probably will be a case for doing that. I think if they don't, there's a danger that the Korean exchange rate will appreciate, which could be bad news for Korean manufacturers. And I think also given, slowing growth in Korea, there's a strong case that sort of in terms of the Korean economy, there would be an argument for lowering rates if the Fed sort of creates the space for them to do that.
Right. Now, Professor Mason, you said it's going to take some time to tame the inflation. Now, maybe still far from that 2% target range. Then what do you think what target do you think the inflation will be reached the next month then?
Well, I think, again, there's been discussion in the past of a 3 or 4% target. I think eventually they may move towards that. I think at this point, I think a lot of people are going to be less focused on that headline rate than what's happening in particular categories of prices. Something that's really been driving inflation in the U.S. and elsewhere recently has been housing costs, rents. And we know that the official measures there really lag behind what's happening in the market. We've seen measures of market rents coming down a lot recently. So there's good reason to think that the measures that the Fed relies on are likely to follow that. And I think that's something that probably they're going to be paying a lot of attention to next month because that's a very large part of the overall price index and has been a very big contributor to inflation recently.
Indeed. Professor Mason, thank you so much for joining us all the way from New York this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Now, 1 month has passed since the wildfire took place in South Korea's eastern Gangneung city. The huge fire was put out on the same day of the initial report, thanks to the firefighters who went into the flames. Our Kim Jang-sil met them in Gangneung.
Firefighters are moving through the burning forest. The heavy smoke blurs their vision, making it hard to tell if there are any people. Here you see last month's wildfire that took one life and burnt hundreds of buildings. And this is what it looks like now in one residential area where all 7 buildings were burnt to the ground.
It was the strongest wind I've ever experienced in my life. The flames were leaping from here to there. So if you put them out in one place, they started to burn somewhere else. Everywhere was just a sea of fire.
We asked him what drives firefighters walk into this sea of fire.
We are scared too, of course, but there could be somebody who needs our help, so we go in. And all these buildings are people's property. We need to protect them. We don't go in alone, we always go in with teammates.
Meet the firefighters of the Hwandonghae Special Response Team, an elite unit that specialized in putting out wildfires. A 30-member team works in shifts of 10 people at a time, and each team moves together as if it were a single cell. Even on a day off, the firefighters train themselves so they can climb mountains, carry people, and control the water hose. In a rare moment of downtime, they play ping pong. This time, the losing team has to buy fried chicken. Captain Kwon Soon-bin is in charge of keeping these young firefighters safe.
Since I'm the commander of the team, I have to make sure no one gets hurt on a mission. I'm most proud, but also worried when we go to the scene to complete our mission.
But what's most important is their trust in each other. The firefighters here at Hwandonghae Fire Station say they can go inside the fire because they trust their teammates. Spending 24 hours together on each shift, they say they watch each other's back at all times. These hidden heroes are on the watch even as we sleep. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News, Gangneung.
Cancer is a leading cause of death for many countries globally. But South Korea has a new weapon in the fight against this disease, heavy ion therapy. Our Song Yoo-jin has the story.
Cancer has been the #1 cause of death in South Korea every year since 1983. Doctors and scientists continue to work hard to develop more effective treatments, such as heavy ion therapy. Severance Hospital in Seoul is the first in Korea to use a heavy ion therapy device. So what exactly is heavy ion therapy?
It's a type of radiation treatment. Simply put, we accelerate carbon ions, a type of heavy ion, make them into beams, and project the beams on the cancer cells to get rid of them.
Carbon ions are heavier than protons or electrons used in conventional radiation therapy. This means they are more powerful and destructive to cancer cells. That's why experts say heavy ion therapy is 2 to 3 times more effective. The therapy center is divided into 2 sections. First, the accelerator. The device changes carbon gas into ions and accelerates them to up to 70% the speed of light, creating energy beams. The beams are then sent through these pipes to the therapy rooms next door. So patients lie down inside this 9-meter-long gantry, and the device projects accelerated carbon ion beams at the cancer cells to destroy them. Severance Hospital is the world's first to have 2 of these rotating gantries. Patients don't have to worry about moving around during treatment, which takes less than 30 minutes, as the gantries can shoot carbon ion beams from any angle. The center also has a device that projects the beams from above. The Heavy Ion Therapy Center opened in late April. Right now, the therapy is only available for prostate cancer patients, but the center plans to expand its treatment options soon.
We are hoping to use this therapy on other types of cancer that are resistant to traditional treatments, like liver, bone, and melanoma. We believe heavy ion therapy could be a game changer.
South Korea is now the 7th country in the world to possess a heavy ion therapy device. The battle against cancer is ongoing, but with this kind of cutting-edge technology, humanity is taking a step closer to victory. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in the United Kingdom, where Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has promised to provide Ukraine with air defense missiles and long-range attack drones. The pledge follows a 2-hour meeting on Monday between Sunak and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. The UK also promised to start basic training of Ukrainian pilots this summer, and that it will work with allies to eventually provide F-16 jets. Zelenskyy stopped by the UK for a surprise visit while on a tour of Western allies to drum up support for his country's counter-offensive. He has already visited Rome, Berlin and Paris and has secured extra pledges for tanks, armoured vehicles and other weapons. Moving on to the tech sector, Microsoft has won approval from the European Union's antitrust regulator for its planned $69 billion takeover of games company Activision Blizzard. The approval was announced on Monday but is subject to certain concessions from Microsoft. These include a 10-year licensing deal that would allow users to stream games via any cloud game streaming service of their choice. The proposed acquisition, one of the biggest deals in the video game industry, has seen it still needs approval from the UK and US. Just last week, it was blocked by the UK's regulator, and its US counterpart has also threatened to block the deal. Now, legendary poker player Doyle Brunson has died at the age of 89. He passed away on Sunday in Las Vegas. Known as the Godfather of Poker by some fans and as Texas Dolly to others, he was the first American to win $1 million in poker tournaments. The Texas native won 10 World Series of Poker tournaments, the second highest of any player. He also won 2 World Championships over his 50-year career. Born in August 1933, Brunson started playing poker professionally after a knee injury ended his college basketball career. And finally, the 76th edition of the Cannes Film Festival kicks off on Tuesday. Taking place in the French coastal city, the 11-day event will see stars from all corners of the world make an appearance. The festival will open with the French-language film Jean du Barry, starring Johnny Depp. It will also see Jennie, a member of the K-pop group Blackpink, step onto the red carpet as an actress. She appeared in the American drama The Idol, which will be screened out of competition. Despite no Korean films being entered into the competitive part of the festival, 7 will be screened on the sidelines. There are 21 films in the running for the festival's prestigious Palme d'Or Award.
Good morning. The heat is intensifying and we could have a taste of midsummer heat temperatures this afternoon. Most regions will notice scorching summer heat with an expected high of 30 degrees in the capital, and Gyeongju perhaps seeing a high of 34 degrees this afternoon. And take extra care in the sun as well. We won't be able to avoid exposure to strong sun during the day, so have your sunblock and sunglasses ready to protect yourself from the skin and eye damage. And it looks to be another ozone action day. Making matters worse, the capital region will have bad air quality all day. And Chungcheong, Namdo, and Gyeongsangdo provinces will see bad air during the first half of the day. Now, top ratings in most regions will be 2 to 4 degrees higher this afternoon in the 30s. Drink plenty of water and take it easy today. We'll have more days with above normal temperatures under a fair amount of sunshine, except on Thursday. And the south coast and Jeju will be seeing rain at the end of the week. Now that's Korea for you. Here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. Thanks for watching.
Hello, my name is Andrew Chernesky. I'm the ambassador of the Republic of Belarus in the Republic of Korea. Arirang is a Korean national song which goes deep into centuries, helping for the future generation to understand better the rich history and culture of the Republic of Korea. Today, we have met an opportunity to understand better the Belarusian culture. And we found that there are some things which is common between Belarus and Korea culture, even in spite of remoteness of the countries. And I think in our very complicated world, it's very important to find provisions for making bridges between countries. And I think that studying culture and history of countries helps us to better understand each other, resonating with the word Arirang.
저는 5월 되면 내 가슴이 먹먹하거든요. 우리나라 군인이 우리나라 사람들을 두들겨 패고 또 죽이고 그랬지 않았습니까? 내가 할 일은 해야겠다 해가지고 남아서 숨어서 이제 사진으로 기록을 했던 것입니다. 저는 5.18 민주화 운동을 사진으로 기록했던 기자 나경표입니다.
Lotte takes a new leap beyond its boundaries. Our change will lead to better lives for all. New Lotte, the power of a better world. New today, better tomorrow. Lotte.
어쩌다 마주친 making a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation. Making news just for you. It's May 16th here in Seoul. I'm Yoon, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Kim Xiang.
Good morning, Yoon.
Good morning. And Choi Ji-hee.
Good morning, Yoon.
All right, and both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. Let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Now, living costs have been surging due to inflation, but how extreme has it gotten? Well, we're seeing even the cheapest cup of coffee, instant coffee, become more expensive. That's because we're seeing a shortage of cheap Robusta beans. Wholesale prices for these relatively easily produced beans are at their highest in nearly 12 years. Now, this has brought up instant coffee prices. For instance, Germany, where the most coffee is sold in Europe, has seen instant coffee prices jump by 20% in a single year. Next up, South Korean consumers have switched from no Japan to yes Japan. For the first time in 4 years, Japan's Asahi canned draft beer has made it to convenience stores in Korea, quickly running out of stock. Japan is now the #1 travel destination for Koreans, and this is quite different from how consumers perceived Japan back in 2019. Back then, Koreans participated in nationwide boycotts against Japanese products in retaliation for ongoing trade disputes. And last but not least, many were quite bummed out to hear that it might rain almost every day this July. A widely used weather forecast site predicted that it would rain for all but 3 days in July here in Korea, but current technology can only forecast rain up to 2 weeks in advance. Even the website that offered July's weather forecast said at the very bottom of its site that the forecast should be more accurate once one checks it up to 10 days in advance. Now, we're going to take a closer look at the third news item. Now, this weather forecast didn't come from the Korea Meteorological Administration, and I couldn't trust whether we can know the exact weather for roughly 2 months later. So what better way to find out whether this forecast is accurate than to ask a weather forecaster? Take a listen to what this analyst from the KMA had to say on the viral weather forecast for July.
This graph is simply predicting what could happen in July. It's hard to say this is an official forecast. Even here at the KMA, we only provide weather forecasts for up to the next 3 days. Same goes for most other countries. That's because the further in advance we predict, the more variables we miss out on, which then leads to more errors.
Now, the analyst added that he's not 100% sure what type of scientific tool this website used to predict the weather for July, but he said it may have been the result of simple calculations using AI. So I would like to expand our newsfeed here to the studio. Ji-hee, could you relate to many people looking into what the weather might be like even 2 months down the road?
Well, I can totally relate to people wanting to know the weather 2 months in advance, because we usually plan our holidays, our trips in advance 2-3 months before usually. Right. And we want our special day to have the perfect weather, right? And also organizers who have outdoor events slated for 2 or 3 months afterward, they would want to know the weather in advance as well. I mean, recently on Children's Day, we all thought we would have a bright sunny day, but it was raining the whole day.
I thought we'll go back to our childhood.
I know, for sure.
It was, I felt sorry for the kids, and all the outdoor activities that were planned in advance, they had to be canceled or postponed or changed to indoor activities as well. And I also heard, what were you going to say?
Oh, good. It didn't even rain that much.
It didn't rain that much.
But it was so gloomy.
I cancelled my plans outdoors and it didn't actually rain.
Well, I ended up going out anyway.
You did?
Yes, I did. And also, because of the Korean Peninsula, its special geography, the uniqueness of it, it's really difficult for KMA to accurately forecast the weather, which is why it's losing trust among the public as well.
Exactly. That's why a lot of people trusted this graph, though it wasn't from the KMA. They thought that it might be more credible. But Xiong, can you explain to us why a lot of the public thinks this way?
Yeah, as you mentioned, the graph we saw, the tables that people are making a big issue about, is actually based from, I'm not sure if I can say, Microsoft operation system. So it's their sort of, I guess, AI prediction model with all the data from the previous years and things like that. Because most of the meteorological societies, association, agencies don't actually provide a month or 2
Right.
months ahead predictions. Well, the KMA also did not have their own weather prediction modeling software until around 2019. Before that, they relied on Japanese GSM model, and afterwards the unified model from the UK, the from the 2010s. And we did develop our own model called Kim model.
Oh, wow.
Unfortunately. And it was in circulation from 2020. But as it is quite new data must be collected for it to more accurately predict the future of weather. As well as the Cheollean satellite is a, all sources, all users satellite that the Korean government shot up back in 2010, I think.
Oh.
And that's also been scrutinized a little bit because apparently they didn't have the according software developed to actually go through the data that's been collected from the satellite. So I think a lot of, mismatching and some better efforts might be a better idea.
All right, and that was our news feed for this Tuesday. Moving on to today's discussion topic, how our generation spends our money. That's been a topic we've frequently discussed here on NewsGen. Today, we're going to go deeper and look at why sometimes we have the urge to spend astronomical amounts on luxury products, but also can't bear spending a few dollars on necessities. Take a look at the screen to find out more.
Hose. This is a Korean word that can be directly translated to bluff, showing off, or flexing when you can't afford it. And many seem to think that the new generation, specifically those in their 20s and 30s, have this sort of hose. One economist YouTuber made a hose pyramid based on what he thinks youth flex money on to show off.
This captivated the attention of many as they wanted to see how far they could make it to South Korea's flexing pyramid.
We came out to the streets of Gangneung to hear from those in their 20s and 30s themselves. According to the Ministry of Employment and Labour, the average annual salary of Koreans aged 25 to 29 is around $30,000. It is estimated to cost at least $1,700 a month to live in Seoul, which doesn't leave an awful lot of room for luxury items. Nonetheless, showing off is becoming trendy.
I actually support this type of flex. As long as you don't harm anyone, you should be able to buy anything you want. I think our generation knows how to enjoy life better than the ones before.
I think golfing has become quite common. I have a few friends who don't show off too much, but they play golf. That's why I think high-end products could come off as the owners bluffing.
I think we should be wary about spending excessively, especially since it could affect you in the long run.
We even heard from a few millennials visiting from France to see what they had to say on the flexing pyramid.
I think that maybe it's getting reverse in France because people are more focusing on slow life, eating local, buying stuff that is sustainable, but they're willing to put the money in it, and even sustainable products are quite expensive. So it's another way to kind of flex, I guess.
After asking what young people in Korea think hose is, we found out that most thought high-end products were the epitome of showing off. In reality, South Korea is the largest luxury spenders in the world. And today, NewsGen aims to look into this consumption pattern.
Now, this is the flexing pyramid we carried out to Gangnam Station. We spent around 2 hours there and asked some 60 people to choose what they thought was the biggest show-off, or so-called hose. And most chose, as you can see, luxury cars and high-end products. And Xiong, you actually went out to the streets with me, as you can see through our video. So why don't you tell us a bit more about this pyramid and what people had to say about it?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of effort went into making this pyramid.
For sure.
Thank you, everyone. And the show-off pyramid, I like to call it better than hose pyramid, was actually originally created by a Korean YouTuber who focuses on real estate and wealth management. The pyramid itself and order of items are entirely subjective, as mentioned by the original author, but has caught quite the attention of Korean media outlets, as it has displayed the most common consumption patterns of the Korea's public. So whilst I reiterate that the pyramid does not represent factual data, it was interesting to see what South Koreans regard as showing off.
Right.
So let's have a look at the so-called flexing pyramid.
All right.
At the top of the table, we have the expensive furniture, followed by interior design and real estate. Now, as the author mentioned, the top 3 items go hand in hand. If you don't have real estate already, it is more likely to stick to affordable furniture and interior designs, especially if you're renting. Next items in descending order are luxury cars, watches, golfing, luxury goods, fine dining, and lastly, body profile shoot.
And Xiong, as you mentioned, this isn't based on any factual data. That's why we went out to the streets to see like whether people could relate.
Choose, yeah.
Exactly. So I would like to ask the same question here in the studio.
Right.
Chihi, how far have you made it up this pyramid?
Well, first of all, I was quite surprised to see this pyramid at first because I couldn't really relate to it.
Really? No, why?
Because not everybody spends money to show off their wealth. And especially the last 2 on the pyramid, which I have done before. I don't think there are ways of flexing or showing off your wealth, really.
The last 2, what, to have your
body
own home,
profile
luxury
shoot.
cars.
No, I meant the bottom tier, the bottom tier. So having a body profile shoot and
Fine
also
dining.
fine dining. Because from time to time on special occasions, on family birthdays, or if you're with a loved one wanting to celebrate a special day, you would go on fine dining. And I've done those 2 before, so I'd say I'm on the 7th tier of this pyramid. Yes, but I don't think, like I said, not everybody wants to show off through these sort of consumptions.
Right. And the point of this pyramid is that you can't afford it, yet you still want to show off.
Yeah.
So knowing all this, where do you land on the pyramid?
Yes, I mean, to be honest, I've never been such a big fan of luxury goods in general. You know, it's not to say that I'm against all things expensive, but I prefer something that fits the price range. Something with, you know, if it's going to be expensive, I expect fantastic craftsmanship. I expect good quality, something that'll last long, made from good ingredients, or, you know, even if it's clothing, made from good, the base cloth materials, yeah. But a lot of the times it seems like today's trend of luxury goods market especially, they'd like to focus more on the marketing side of things. It's all about the hype, it's all about creating something cool. I mean, I actually personally quite like watches, and I wish to be on the top tier of the pyramid for watches one day. But even the watches, some of the more sort of fashion brands, you know, that are luxury brands, they don't have good movements.
Right. For sure.
Yeah, the watch might look nice, but the movement inside might be bought from a Japanese Miyota movement usually. That's what the mid-range watches go for.
So to sum up,
Stop there.
right, to sum up, you aren't really for Jose.
I hate Jose.
Yeah, you're not really.
To be honest, I think that's what some people were actually a little bit against, because it says Jose pyramid, and it kind of makes you think, oh, am I going to show off if I select this?
Am I bluffing?
Right.
For sure. Now, Chihi, I also know that you found some own comments yourself from our viewers and also people who wrote down comments on different articles. Why don't you share it with us?
That's right. So here's what some other youth from our generation had to say. Take a look at the screen. One is a 26-year-old graduate who felt flustered studying and trying to save up without an income. That's why he said we all should have a reality check. Make sure that we're standing at the right place, or we can afford the things that we want to buy regarding this pyramid. And another millennial said this pyramid made her want to save up harder, which was a good motivation for her. And one person in his mid-40s said you should spend on things you actually want and need. And your consumption shouldn't be affected by others.
And these are all very good points, but I think it comes down, I think our discussion topic comes down to Jose, this keyword, right? It's not about how you spend your money, it's about whether you can afford it or not, yet choose to show off. So what do you think about this, Xiong? Do you think spending money, sometimes to the extent that it's burdensome, seems to be a new virtue for millennials and Gen Z?
Yeah, I mean, especially I'm glad that the 26-year-old's comment we saw just now said that we should all have a reality check regarding the pyramid. I shared his opinion when our newsroom first discussed this topic of Jose as well, because the fact is the majority of Koreans who live outside of Seoul don't even have easy access to such overly luxurious items.
Good point.
The illusion of inclusivity social media and online media spaces create is also a fabricated one, and that's a fertile, extremely fertile ground for big luxury goods companies to, have some marketing schemes going around where you can manipulate the public crowd into thinking these are sort of everyday essential items. You know, if you go out on the streets on the way to work, you got to look a certain way. You know, all these fabricated images, which are great, which is part of our society, our culture. But, still that promotes a lot of overspending. A lot of times you think, oh, I'll need this bag because everybody's got one.
Right.
Because it's the it item, it's the trendy item of the day.
And it's quite ironic because at the same time we're saying stuff like 거지방, like open community chat rooms, like promote not spending too much money, right?
Yeah.
So it's very different there. But what are your thoughts, Chi, on our generation spending excessively?
Well, I agree with the comment made by the person who was in his 40s. He said we should spend money only on things that we want and we need and not buy things because of others, by comparing yourself with others. But I think sadly our society is a 눈치 society, meaning we tend to be very conscious of what others think of ourselves, which is why we compare ourselves in terms of what we have, the materialistic aspects, which is also why Korea stands among the top countries who spend the most on luxurious goods, right? So I think this is all related to this Hosei pyramid, wanting to show off materialistically.
All right, and now I think it's a good time to include an economics expert and hear what he has to say on our discussion topic. We'll be back right after this. All right, let's hear from an economics expert and find out what he has to say on young people spending excessively. More specifically, let's find out what he has to say about the psychology of having to or wanting to spend a lot. Please welcome Dr. Jarrett Watson, Assistant Professor of Marketing at NYU Stern School of Business. Pleasure to have you here again, Dr. Watson.
Hello, Dr. Watson.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you all.
All right, Dr. Watson, you probably saw this showing off pyramid throughout our whole discussion today. What do you think about it? And do you think millennials and Gen Z actually do have a tendency to show off with their spending?
Yeah, I think the show-off pyramid does a great job at historically capturing how people have tried to flex, how they've tried to show off, or as you said, the Hosei. I think it's evolved a little bit since then, right? So when we think about Gen Z and millennials today, the one aspect I think that might have been missing was the experiential aspect.
Right.
So we see a lot of emphasis today with showing off through novelty, going places other people haven't been, being the first to a place. And, you know, odds are if we were to ask people today, if they want to go to the latest Michelin-starred restaurant or the newest hot restaurant in town, a decent chunk of them would opt for that newest, hot, hard-to-get-into place because of that scarcity aspect. So I think the pyramid captures quite a bit with some tweaks for the younger generations.
For sure.
Yes, I mean, Dr. Watson as well, why do you think a growing number of youths or youngsters think spending a lot is the way to go? I mean, is this case in the States too? A lot of goods are expensive these days. The luxury companies are hiking up the prices every year. I mean, what do you think is behind this trend as well?
Sure. I think two things are driving it. So the first of which is social media. We can see what people are doing today, right? It's easier for us to show off, create the impression of wealth than ever before. The other one is when we look at the top of that pyramid, it's becoming harder and harder to attain. Right. So as that Gen Z or that millennial individual looking at that pyramid, it's a lot easier to say, maybe I should treat myself to a $200 dinner because I'm a long way off from buying the house. Right. We see reaching the top of that pyramid futile. And so we indulge in the bottom of the pyramid more frequently.
Before we go on to the last question, though, I have a quick question. If they try to save up $200 for that really good dinner, that means they have to save up on other things, sometimes to the point that, you know, they can't buy necessities in life. What's with that?
Yeah, so a big part of that is people focusing on the wrong aspect, right? So last time I was here, we talked about value. And I think what happens is people get allured by the benefits that come with that purchase, and they don't focus on the costs. And it's not just the financial costs, right? But it's also the psychosocial or the emotional costs. And so we look and we say, great, people are going to love it. People are going to see us. We're going to be there. And we're not focusing on, oh, but tomorrow, that means I have to go without, right? Or next week, I'm going to have to scrounge or ask my parents for additional money. And as a function of that, right, it's us overweighting the benefits and not paying enough attention to the costs.
Sure. I see. And Chi, you have a question for Dr. Watson as well?
Right. So, Dr. Watson, what's the best way we can spend money? Do you have any tips for us?
Sure. So, that last comment you had from the 40-something-year-old individual, I think captured it, which is you've got to focus on yourself and not on others. And, an easy way to do that is just to go through the thought experiment and say, how am I going to feel about this purchase 1 month from now? What about 1 year from now, right? What if nobody sees it? How am I going to feel? And if you go through that thought experiment of those possible outcomes, that will hopefully help people consider the costs associated with that purchase. And as a result, they're going to make sure that they'll be truly satisfied after they do it.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Watson. It was a pleasure to have you here again.
Thank you, Dr.
Always.
Thank you.
Cheers.
All right. And as usual, Dr. Watson gave us a lot of good points we could talk about. Any that you had in mind?
No, I totally agreed with Dr. Watson, how he said we should focus on ourselves when we're spending money. Really make sure that you want it and you're not just buying it to please others.
Right, for sure. What about you, Xiong?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agreed with the point where he made rare experiences, rare items. I think that's really becoming a thing as well. First to be somewhere, first to a newly opened restaurant, first to have this limited edition line of shoes, watches, whatever you think. I think that really drives up the hype of spending as well.
For sure. And before we end up our discussion, why don't we talk about the disparity in consumption? I think some people would not even care to spend a few dollars on lunch, but they would, save up to buy like this really expensive
Some people will buy a coffee when they have the 10 stamps on a coupon, but they'll be like, oh, I'm going to get that Louis Vuitton bag or something.
But what do you think is with that? Why do you think our generation does that?
I mean, I think, to be honest, as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, Dr. Wilson mentioned as well, I think this is social media as well. It drives a lot of that. A lot of marketing, a lot of people, other people wearing this, doing that. You see, you go on your social media, and there's everybody going to nice restaurants, driving their nice cars. But I think the concern here, that's not for everybody. I see a lot of that, but I try to distance that from the level of affordability I can actually afford myself. I think the key point here is to spend wisely, as in the sense, if you want something nice, if you want something from a bigger brand, luxury items, you buy that so it lasts a long time. So go for the brands that actually has good quality, has reputation to last the years to come.
All right. And Chi, any tips on how we should spend more wisely then?
Well, don't go broke trying to look rich.
Exactly, yeah.
Yes, no matter how much you want to show off materialistically, there are virtues and the vibes that a person can get only by investing your time and effort in it, not just money. So I want us to be able to appreciate, recognize, and really cherish those virtues, invaluable virtues that money can't buy.
All right. And I think that's a very good way we can end up.
Spiritual way.
Exactly. All right. Now, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Kim Xiong.
My pleasure, Ian.
And Choi Ji-hee.
Thank you, Ian.
And thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.